everyone. Let's get dangerous.
This is so cool.
I know.
It feels so right.
It's Jake Ciely.
He's opening our minds to new ideas. Kill him!
Who is that guy?
Your mama. You just made the list.
Oh, wait, you're serious? Let me laugh even harder.
It's all in fantasy. Things of the range.
Sure, we talk about it all the time. Really? No. Burn.
Game on, you ducks. It is week 2 of fantasy football already. Yes, we're already in week 2. Before you know it, Thanksgiving is going to be here, and then the end of the season, and we'll be miserable about all of our teams, or super happy. Hopefully, you're listening to this show to kind of snipe other people and not have to deal with the madness of week 1. If so, apologies. Jordan Love, Puka Nacua, possibly H.N., who else too? Oh, Ferguson. Yeah, lots of shares. Is there? Barkley in the background's getting upset. Yeah, Roman Dunze. I actually have 0 Roman Dunze, so I was okay on that one. You can't blame me for a Dunze. You can blame me for the rest, but you can't blame me for a Dunze. And hopefully you're not blaming us over at The Athletic. The waiver column is up. It is live. We're going to talk about it today. Talk about the Warrior Report. Talk about the power-up players. Talk about waivers and even some streamers. But also some news of things that happen at Chris Meaney over at FTN. Make sure you're checking out the great tools and package over there, which will give some insight into some of these things that we are talking about. And before we get rolling, as a reminder, like the contest is over, but if you haven't subscribed and reviewed and all that type of stuff, please do at least the subscribe thing. Oh, and as a reminder, at least just listen to this part. Like you could click on the podcast and just like scroll through it super fast and just do that at least once a week, please, because Apple now does this whole thing where you're not a listener if you haven't listened in a week. And you just get bumped off
week.
Things.
A week. That's it.
Is it 2 weeks? Or is it 2 weeks or 1 week? I'm gonna say a week just to be safe.
Yeah,
I think it might be 2, but it's just. And here's how I know that we need to, because the 4 winners. So we had Mike W, which was for Mike White, Jordan P, I don't remember what that was, Stephen G, who actually emailed me, Mike Schoenrock. So I got Stephen and Mike. The top 2, Mike W and Jordan P, haven't heard from you, buddies. I mean, if you want to give away your free copy of Madden or the premium, this is the number 1 level of the FTN membership, like the top level might get kicked down to Steven or Mike because they'll get to choose. Whoever responds first. I'm giving Mike and Jordan, I originally said 48 hours. I'm going to be a little bit generous, as I am at times, sometimes. I'm going to give them till the 3rd podcast this week, as in the mailbag. I will announce in the mailbag that you either get it or you didn't, and we're moving down, which I think Eric H is holding out hope for, because the multiple entries, Mike S actually finished in 4th and 5th, so we'd have to drop down to Eric down in 6th. So there's still a chance, Eric, so hold on. Speaking of still a chance, do we want to start with worries or power-ups? Where are you going, Manny?
Power-ups.
No, we're doing neither because we're starting with news. Haha, you see what I did there?
I did, yeah. I saw that. Yeah, nice.
You could not have gotten that one right.
No.
The big news, obviously, I think what everybody's waking up for, at least watched last night, was Christian McCaffrey. And man, if there was ever a case to be made for this new sleeper feature, I think last night was it. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Sleeper has a new feature where you designate somebody on your bench. It's actually, if you click on the player's name, it's like this little infinity looking symbol, which I appreciate because it has to do with Nicole and I's wedding. Yeah. But you click on it and you designate that as the return or the substitution player for whoever you want. You don't get to pick like 6 guys in your lineup. You pick 1. So anybody with Christian McCaffrey for last night, if you didn't have Jordan Mason, if you weren't able to make waivers, like some leagues lock waivers as soon as the game starts on Sunday, and you can't make pickups even if the players haven't played. So you couldn't have picked up Alan Lazard and went bananas. You couldn't even picked up Isaac Rendo, who didn't end up mattering because he didn't even touch the ball. So anyway, point being is you do the substitution. So when you have something like yesterday where Jordan Mason got mad about getting asked, like, when did you know when you were playing? Like this turned out to be kind of a cluster, you know what?
Yes.
On the 49ers side, because there's reports saying they knew on Friday, and then there's reports saying like, oh, I didn't know until game time, which I kind of feel like where there's smoke, there's fire type of thing. Like it seems like they knew, but anyway, that's the feature. I'm a proponent for it because I said like maybe happens 2 or 3 times a year, and I would hate to be in this situation. Like, look, we went into last night's game and it sounded like it might be 70% of the work, but we talked yesterday on Sirius XM. We were talking about it as if Christian McCaffrey was getting the work, just as maybe a little bit softer than it used to be. Like maybe he only gets 12 carries. Maybe, he's out there again, 70% of the snaps. Anyway, but that being said, with how good, this is where we have to go now, with how good Jordan Mason looked, no surprise, Shanahan running back system. There you go. Boom. You put it in. I mean, I could average 0.1 yards per carry in Shanahan. Just because it's not negative in most other teams. Sure. I might carry a ball twice before I die. That being said, Jordan Mason, above average. Like, I would put Jordan Mason, for me, some people might differ. A lot of people I saw victory lapping on Twitter like, oh, he's one of my favorite running backs in that draft class. Like, really? Really? Really, buddy? Really? Anyway, Jordan Mason, above average running back. I put him in the conversation with Zach Moss. So you can imagine what people's reactions would be even before we saw Mason, knowing what Moss could do if you were in the system and on this team. With how good he looked, there's this whole like Christian McCaffrey, and we didn't like how he was looking with the calf up. What do you think the chances are that Christian McCaffrey sits out another game or two until he's 100%, because he is Christian McCaffrey? And if the 49ers, I'm not going to say they don't need him, but last night they didn't look like they needed him.
No.
Would Jordan Mason be your clear number one, far and away? It doesn't matter what else I need or is out there. Like, this is like, if you waited, you have to go after him, right? Like, just because, even if it's only one more game, you're talking about a top 15 running back.
Yeah, it's just like, if it was any other team, I would say just give me J.K. Dobbins. But because it's the Niners and what you just said, it's pretty important to have Jordan Mason. Like, to me, I think he was being straight up and honest that the team told him he was playing on Friday, and that, of course, is not a good look, and you could get some fines and whatnot for the Niners not talking.
Yeah, I feel like he said that, and then somebody with the team was like, "No, we didn't."
Oops, right? It was like OBJ It was like Tyreek last week when he was asked about OBJ in the press conference, and he was just like, "Man, I haven't seen OBJ in weeks." And then all of a sudden, like, somebody said something, and he was like, "Whoa, was I not supposed to say that?" Like, I have seen OBJ. He's looking good. Like, he just didn't know he shouldn't have said that. So I think that was the case last night. But to me, and if that is the case, that the Niners told Mason that he was playing on Friday, then that means CMC is not close. Like, he may be a little close, but he is not close to being, 90%, 80%. And what's the point? Right? The defense is good. You're playing the Vikings. You're playing Minnesota. You're going to beat Minnesota without CMC. There's no question about that. So why not just ease him back into this? And you have Super Bowl aspirations. So what's the point of rushing him back? But yeah, man, like, if CMC is gone, if CMC is ruled out on Friday this time, Mason is going to be ranked for me as a top 15 running back. It's just the way that it is. Against Minnesota, they're going to be they're 5.5 point favorites last night. Immediately when that game finished, they went up to like touchdown favorites. They'll probably creep up to 8.5 point favorites even without CMC. So yeah, it's a home run play, man. Like, it really is. So if you were able to pick him up last night, you mentioned the sleeper thing. It just worked out perfectly for them in week 1. Crazy.
So, like, I think the part of it, too, is there's a non-zero chance McCaffrey gets back out there and aggravates the injury.
100%.
Like, what if what if they do wait 2 more games? And it's like, man, it's only 2 more games. And then, but, what if they bring him out in week 4 and then it's all of a sudden he plays and I hate to do this, but Saquon Barkley. Like, not even like he aggravates it, is that he's out there 100%, freak accident, rolls up his ankle. And I think that's the importance where, if you want to say Dobbins, I understand, and we are going to talk through the waiver running backs. And if you're saying, look, Dobbins could be a year-long winner, and we already know he's the lead. Like, we're not going to wait and hope that Gus Edwards gets hurt for the Dobbins value. Dobbins value is already here. It's already now. It's not going away unless he gets hurt. It's kind of like this clock on Mason. So again, if you want to go the opposite direction, it's just, we know if Mason and Dobbins are both out there next week, Mason's going to be ranked higher. So it's really what you need. And I'm not going to, so this really isn't getting into the waivers so much for wide receivers, but it is. I actually put Lazard in, I used to call it Mezville, but now I'm just calling it Meh. I'll pass. It's just like, I'm not going hard after Alan Lazard. Look, I rhymed. When it comes to Alan Lazard, watching that game, so yeah, the 22% team target share is nice with Aaron Rodgers. I'm not including the garbage time and Tyrod Taylor, but the garbage time is when he scored the touchdown. He scored his first touchdown on a free play, and I'm not taking those away from him, so to speak, in the fact of Mike Williams played 10 snaps. They said that he was going to be limited and they're going to be brought along slowly. I don't think anybody expected him to be brought along that slowly. That's basically a non-factor. But I feel like this is also Jordan Mason-esque, as in you might get 2 more games, but once Mike Williams is up and running, he's going to be the number 2. I mean, if you look at the target distribution, it was all Garrett Wilson and all Alan Lazard. And Breece Hall. Wide receivers only, but yeah, those were the 3. Like Tyler Conklin, 2. We can go ahead and move on from him as the tight end. Hope that, as a late flyer, which nobody was drafting as more than that. But Corley, not even out there. And then the rest just not involved. I think Xavier Gibson was 4th, and it was a very small, if anything. So are you with me, or are you going to make the argument that's been there before, which was the argument we had, I say we, the community had last year. The excitement from Lazard was, well, Aaron Rodgers loved Lazard in Green Bay. Alan Lazard saw more end zone targets when Devontae Adams was there in their last season together. Mm-hmm. So maybe I'm wrong. Like, make the case that I'm wrong. Do you want to make that case? Because I'm okay with it. Like I said, I would still take a chance on him, but I wouldn't blow my fab. I wouldn't blow the top waiver priority. And to give you an idea, I have Greg Dortch at 14 at wide receivers. I'd put him right behind Greg Dortch. I would still only put him at 15.
So, like, for wide receiver pickups, yeah.
In front of Curtis Samuel, Yoshevich, Mooney, Wandell, the guy in that range.
Right, yeah. And, like, Cooks is another guy to me with Ferguson sideline maybe for a couple weeks. Like, he's a guy I'm probably more interested in as the clear number 2 in Dallas maybe over the next couple of weeks.
I have Brandon Cooks
down
on
the
the
stretch.
8.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, like, Cooks is just a guy that I'd rather have than some of the names that you mentioned.
I'll give you 2. They're both rookies. Mitchell and McMillan, I would take over Lazard.
Yes, I agree with you. McMillan had the touchdown, and he may have had another one too. Yeah,
3. He almost had 3. Adonai Mitchell almost had 2.
He did, and Richardson missed him on one deep. I had a couple nice deep balls. He missed him on one throw. But yeah, no, I'm with you on Lazard. I do remember having this conversation with you last time, and why you and I were a little sour on Garrett Wilson was because of Alan Lazard, right? Alan Lazard, and they're familiar with each other, and you mentioned the red zone stuff. I think that there's a real possibility that he's the 2 ahead of Mike Williams just because of how familiar they are. Ready. Yeah, even when Mike Williams is ready. I think that Williams is a higher ceiling. I think that he should be the 2, and he does have a higher ceiling than Lazard, but Rodgers does have this. Like, he went to him on 3rd down, the opening drive, and Lazard had that drop. And, of course, the free play. We've seen it so many times. Does anybody get that free play more than Aaron Rodgers? Like, I see them blow that down all the time. But he looked over, the flag's there, and he chucks it. And then the broadcast says right away, Rodgers has a record 19 touchdowns on free plays. And I was actually watching the Manning cast. It is insane. And I was watching the Manning cast. I had Belichick on there, and they were having conversations about that, kind of tongue-in-cheek without saying that Rodgers gets it more than anybody, but they did say they had seen that multiple times. But you're right. That was a play that was just a free play, and Taylor hit him at the end zone at the very end. So I'm not going to go crazy on Lazard, and I think people will because they saw it in prime time. They're obsessed with Rodgers. They saw Lazard, 2 touchdowns, and he'll get all the fab. So I think if you're really, really hurting at the wide receiver position, you have Deontay Johnson, you have London, you have some guys that we're going to talk about that you're worried about. Maybe Lazard is the better play because you can put him in over the next couple of weeks. But some of those other guys that you mentioned, like the rookies, I would much rather have, like, if you're in that situation to stash like an Adonai Mitchell or a McMillan, I would go that route instead.
Well, I'm trying to look right now.
Puka Nacua is another guy too, right? You may just need somebody to play immediately.
You might. And I'm looking for, with Rodgers on the field, I was going to look at, so Garrett Wilson and Alan Lazard had identical 3rd down target shares of 42.9. And then with Rodgers only, it was 50% Wilson, 33% Lazard. So still a big chunk to your 3rd down point. I mean, 33%.
But still Wilson.
And, well, actually, let me click on it because the great thing about True Media is I could pull, it's 2 out of 3. So, it's, or 1 out of 3, sorry.
It was just the first play. It was just the first drive of the game where he went to Lazard there, and Lazard had that drop. So, yeah, that was really it.
So Tyrod went his way a lot more. All right, so Lazard aside.
You're right about Conklin. I had Conklin prop. That was no good. He one target for Conklin, and as soon as Taylor came in, he targeted Conklin right away. I'm like, oh, there's Conklin with the catch. Yeah, I mean, you can forget about him. It just seems like it's going to be Brees, Garrett,
Wilson.
And Garrett, you may be right. You could rewind the tape from last year. You may be spot on about Garrett not being able to hit his ceiling and potential in the wide receiver 1 because of Lazard.
Because of touchdowns and because of Lazard.
Lazard.
It's always been, whether it's Lazard or Mike Williams, it's always been the touchdowns.
Right.
Like the volume, great. And he didn't even get 100 yards. Now, 49ers defense. The Jets do have the Titans, if I'm not mistaken. Titans on the road this week. So be interesting to watch. Have you already looked at week 2 Survivor, by the way?
No, I took a little bit of glance at last night in the schedule, just putting a couple picks in the tracker, but I didn't actually lock in on a Survivor. Yeah, didn't lock in.
I got a complete sidebar. I messaged the guy, so I've been one for a really long time, and there's like 600-700 people in it, so it makes it a pretty nice pool, so it's hard not to play it. But they sent an email, and they're like, 11% admin fee. I'm like, see? Your reaction? I was like, wait, okay, 2%. You have to run the thing or like whatever, or because of PayPal or however you get the money, you have to 3% even. Like you have to pay the fees. I was like, 11, really? Like that's a couple thousand.
Yeah,
like,
that's
$50 entries. Hell, if they're $100 entries and you had 7,000 and you have $70,000 and you're gonna take 11 off, you're gonna take $7,000 off the top.
Man, I don't have to side job and just run Survivor pools for people. And that's Bush League. By the way, I just took a quick look.
That was a fair question to ask, right?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
11% is ridiculous.
What did you say? You're not anymore? I missed that because
I was just saying. I was just taking a quick peek. Baltimore is 9.5-point favorites against the Raiders. It's gonna be a pretty chalky pick, but I probably
do you want to blow the Ravens already?
Yeah, maybe. I just want to get by. There's
Houston.
Houston against the Bears, Eagles against the Falcons. I don't know if I'd go Lions against the Bucks. Baker's got something special going on. And maybe the Niners against the Vikings. Just one of those two and just move on.
Jacksonville against the Browns at home?
No. They should.
No?
They should win, but I don't know. Yeah,
would you risk a road team in week 2?
The Niners would probably be the only one.
Oh, no. I was going to say the Chargers in Carolina.
I'd probably beat them. Carolina's atrocious. It's not like Herbert was any good in that game in week 1 either. But
here, look at it this way: if you take Carolina, whoever they're facing, you take the other team every single week. You only have to figure out 3 extra games. Yeah, and you can probably take the Giants those weeks. Whoever's facing them.
Absolutely, just roll with them. I'm in a pool where it's like you pick one team and you just pick them to win or lose all year long. So you can pick a good team because at the end of the day, if your record is like 15-1, like correctly picking that team to win or lose, the tiebreaker would go to the better record. But I just was like, I'm not picking a good team. I'm picking Carolina, and I'm going to pick them to lose every week.
See, there you go. Smart. Yeah. I like it. Back to waivers. The Jordan Love situation has happened since the last time we've done a podcast. Like we haven't covered it since. We got the news. There's been some floated rumors that Ryan Tannehill might get signed, but it sounds like even if that happens, it's, hey, he has to learn the system, he has to learn the playbook, and it's coming in as to back up Malik Willis because we've already heard from the Packers, Malik Willis is the quarterback until Jordan Love is ready to roll. Of course, if Jordan Love ended up 6 weeks and they signed Tannehill, maybe that changes after some time. We've seen Malik Willis. I love the guy, love the player. I wish he would succeed in the NFL, but we have to be honest about what we've seen so far. Similar to Bryce Young, it's been gross, and it's a downtick to everybody. I brought this up in the waiver column to go back down to, interesting enough, of all Packers wide receivers, the one who's out there, there's 2. Reed and Watson are well rostered on Yahoo. Romeo Doubs is still well under being fully rostered, not even close to 60%. He's actually in the 40 to 50% range. Do you know he was the only wideout to top 73% of the routes? And it was 89. He's running like the one. And the volume was kind of there. Watson had touchdown. Obviously, Jaden Reed, because of what he can do, is the one. So the one statistically. But with Willis, would you risk Reed? Would you pick up Doubs? Because I bumped down Doubs to 5, and I said if I knew Love wasn't missing time, he would actually be my number 1 wide receiver pickup this week, ahead of Joshua Palmer, Shaheed, and we're going to talk about the Rams. So he would be my 1, but he's down at 5 because of Malik Willis. Are you with me? Or do you think it's worth arguing that maybe Malik Willis's style can stick with Dobbs, or is it just going to be the Packers continuing to manufacture touches for Jaden Reed?
Yeah, I think that's the latter, right? You got to find a way to get the ball in Jaden Reed's hands, whether it's some end arounds, some bubbles. He's a terrific route runner. He really is. Fantastic player. Like, I just didn't have a lot of shares of him because I thought he was going a little early, and Dobbs was the guy that I picked up. You know, I like Dobbs because I just felt like he was a big part of the offense. He was first in end zone and red zone targets and air yards and target share, and he was consistently on the field, not just like playing snaps, but healthy. Compared to some of the other guys. But this situation in Green Bay is not great. I think it's really bad for Christian Watson, personally. He's a guy that was just getting some red zone looks and the field stretcher, and now it's just like, I don't want anything to do with him over the next couple weeks if Love's not on the field. So, yeah, I would much rather have a Rashid Shaheed. And Derek Carr looked great last week, and he's looked good in like 5-6 consecutive games dating back to last season. Love Clint Kubiak, man. Nobody's really going to talk about it because they beat up on a team that's like a high school squad. But the motion and Kubiak style coming from Shanahan is going to be very similar. And it's good for a lot of players in that offense, apart from Olave in that game, but it just got out of hand. But no, I'm with you. Dubs will. It's going to be tough, right? Reed's probably the only guy I would play, just given that he'll probably be a big part of the offense. But I say they really do lean on Josh Jacobs over these next couple of weeks.
Would it even be top 30 wide receiver for Reed, or would you go further down than that?
I'm probably like further down, like guys like Ladd, Brian Thomas Jr., Jameson.
Oh, here's
Williams.
one.
Those are guys that are ahead of him for me.
I got one. Week 2. Because obviously his snap count's not going to be there yet. Week 2, Alan Lazard or Jaden Reed.
Lazard.
Okay. So that's it. There you go.
I mean, I don't want to say that, but listen, man, Malik Willis, like straight up, it's not ideal. So I'd probably have them in the same sort of tier, but you're right. Williams is not going to be, the fact that he played 10 snaps, this guy's not going to be full go.
So
you did
the interesting
25%
thing
of the snaps week 2.
I found about Willis is the off-target percentages. It's not good, but it's not as bad as you would think. And when his entire career, which isn't a very big career, but it's 14.9. People living in the 14.9 are kind of like mid-levels. Like that's better than Daniel Jones. It's worse than obviously week 1, Patrick Mahomes had a 0 off-target percentage. Like not one target thrown was off. But here's the thing: sacked 18.3% of the time. That's the bigger thing. Is Malik Willis takes too long at times to make his decision. Even I don't know why he doesn't use his legs a little bit more. He does run pretty well and has, but do it a little bit more and kind of pull things off. But anyway, that's
the ball quick will benefit Reed, right? That will be the game plan I think for LaFleur to kind of get that ball quick and Dobbs. Yeah, some short yardage stuff with him as well.
Real quick. Because you kind of leaned into like where I was going, and we talked about it before the podcast even started. But speaking of getting the ball out real quick, I probably have been almost as mad as I've ever been about football yesterday on SiriusXM, in case anybody missed it.
You fired up.
It was actually 2 different things, but the biggest one near and dear to my heart is because I love some Jaden Daniels. I was aggressively ranking him this preseason. We've had discussions about if you like Anthony Richardson, why don't you like Jaden Daniels? And the gap should be closer. And then people push back. It's like, well, it wouldn't be gap like back-to-back then? So week 1 brought up the concerns of why they weren't, why there was love in between them and a few others. It was about a 3 or 4 person gap before you got to Jaden Daniels, also a rookie. But it was the week 1 concern, and it's Cliff Kingsbury because – what the hell are you doing? As you can tell, I've kind of moved on a little bit. I'm much more calmer than I was yesterday because I was bleeping myself as I was going through this. You have Cliff Kingsbury and you have Jaden Daniels, and Kingsbury, he goes back to Notre Dame football, and I hate to keep bringing this up, but it's the whole thing with their quarterbacks. Why don't they can't find a quarterback? You have this quarterback that does everything he did at Duke, which I'm not saying that Riley Leonard was great, but Hartman at Georgia Tech, like you bring all these quarterbacks, or Wake Forest, sorry, all these quarterbacks in, and then it's like, they struggle with Notre Dame. And it's kind of like, at some point, it's like when things continue to happen, sometimes it's like, look in the mirror. Like, what's the commonality? It's 5, 6, 7 different quarterbacks at Notre Dame. Well, what's the commonality? It's Notre Dame. There's 7 different quarterbacks. It's not okay. Jaden Daniels and Cliff Kingsbury. Why does Jaden Daniels not look like he was at LSU? Because there wasn't a lot of deep plays. We heard about this all preseason. Get the ball out quick, short, intermediate. That's not Jaden Daniels' best game. Yes, that's an aspect of it, but that's not Jaden Daniels. He extends plays and also one of the best deep ball throwers for this ability. And you have Terry McLaurin, you have Diami Brown, which maybe he hasn't been able to come through, but you brought in Noah Brown. You're looking for answers, but that doesn't mean don't try things. I don't understand how Cliff Kingsbury drafts and gets Jaden Daniels and runs. This is what I said in my post, meaning, or my blurb, my post. I can't even talk. Oh yeah, now I'm getting there. I'm getting tongue-tied because I'm getting fired up. Yeah. The waiver column is like, you ran the effing Bo Nix offense with Jaden Daniels. What the effing hell? Meaning, if I gave you a 1 to 5 concern level for Jaden Daniels, what would it be?
I would be flirting with 3. Like, it's got to be around 3, given everything that you just laid out. And you're spot on with like the strengths. Like, play to this guy's strengths, and maybe I don't know what Kingsbury's thinking is. Let's just wait till we get the training wheels off. I don't know. Like, I know the offensive line is not great, but short yardage stuff is not ideal, and it's not going to be great for Terry McLaurin. It didn't even give a target to Diami Brown. Didn't look like he pushed the ball down the field really at all in that game or throughout the preseason. The one pass to Brown, and that was it. A lot of design runs. And this is it's not sustainable. It's just not sustainable. In my home league, buddy had Jaden Daniels and he beat me, and he's talking about Daniels and I actually said he watched the show and he's like, you guys are like Daniels. I just knew I was going to pick him last, and away I went. And I was just like, great. But he ran like Lamar in that game. And I said after Lamar ran against KC that was unsustainable, and that's Lamar Jackson. So 16 attempts, 88 rushing yards, great, but he took a lot of shots. The play calling was not great at all. I don't know. I forget, like, just this year, if he can hold up over the course of his career. Like, this is your franchise quarterback. This is the 12th different quarterback Terry McLaurin's played with, and he's into year 6. So you have to kind of figure this thing out. But the play calling was really bad. I am concerned about Terry McLaurin, and I liked him quite a bit. I know there's already a lot of panic. This week against the Giants will be very telling. Again, will they let the training wheels off of him? Will they let him push the ball down the field? That's what he did at LSU. That's what he did so good at LSU with Brian Thomas and Malik Neighbors, moving the ball all around the field, more than 5.5 yards in terms of average depth of target. So we'll see. But one thing I will say is that Todd Bowles does a great job of like blitzing and getting after quarterbacks. Like, he's one of the best defensive minds. So maybe that was part of it. But again, it's what we saw in the preseason as well. So it'd be very telling against the Giants this week, where I know Sam Darnold didn't look good, but he still completed 19 of 24 passes. There's a couple weird moments from him, but he was still able to complete some passes against that secondary. So we'll see what happens. Like, I don't want to see as an owner of Daniels and a supporter of him, I don't want to see him running the football 15 plus times a game. I really don't. I get it. It's good for fantasy, but it's not good for real life.
No, it's not. And the biggest thing you're talking about too is not good for Terry McLaurin. Yeah. Okay. Lining out wide the majority of the time, 89%. So before people overreact to that too much, because I saw some people tweeting this out, his career is 80%. It's not, it's basically a 10% bump, not the death knell that it should be. They're not moving him around as much, but it's also not like, oh my God, they're never moving him around. The one thing I will say, outside to the left snaps, 40 in week 1. Every other season, he's lined out there a lot, but he averages about 410. Well, 40 by times 17 is a hell of a lot more than 410. Let me just put that out there. That's almost double. It's probably about 40% more. That's the bigger concern, is that it's not just outside, is that he's keeping him to one side of the field. But again, move the effing guy around. He is clearly your best wide receiver. Why are you holding him to the freaking outside left? Like, I just...
Yeah, they have nobody else that really can move the needle in that offense. Like Zach Ertz, a couple targets, Eckler targets when they're down. Brian Robinson had a good game. He caught some passes, but like Terry needs to be a bigger part of the offense to help out the young quarterback. Like lean on that guy. He's at 1,000 yards in 4 straight seasons with awful play at the quarterback position.
And so far, awful play calling to start this year. All right. So last one, Puka Nacua. Way too many Puka Nacuas and pouring one out for Puka Nacua. He is out at least 4 weeks. Even if it returns after 4, who knows what it might be at that point. Injuries starting to be a concern for his career. This is a lot starting to pile up. I will say, I'm not like, dynasty, whatever. Like, look, again, Leonard Fournette was hurt in college and then the first 2 years of his NFL career and then wasn't hurt. Like, and he's a running back. So I'm not saying like this is going to continue to be his entire career. On the flip side, a running back of James Conner never has a full season under his belt. We have wide receiver Mike Williams. Mike Williams has been doing up and down this road every single year. So all that being said, I was watching that game. Obviously, everybody was watching that game. And the thing that I noticed is as soon as Nacua left, and I'm watching, and I'm like, wow, I don't think DeMarcus Robinson's the Nacua replacement. It's Tyler Johnson. And I'm watching closely, and I'm like, he's running the Nacua role. This brings up what I said about Yoshivas with the Bengals and why I actually wasn't moving. Like a lot of people were like, put Yoshivas inside the top 30. I'm like, I'll move him inside my top 40, 45 for sure. And even that ended up being too high because I should have stuck with what I said. I should have trusted my own gut, but I was going for hopeful volume. And that game was sideways altogether. The Bengals looked terrible. Like we talked about that on Serious X. So like taking away T. Higgins, your offense should not have been that bad. There's no way. Maybe Zach Taylor's not the bright mind. Maybe it is Brian Callahan. But anyway, that's a complete sidebar. Yoshi fits Tyler Boyd's role. If you're replacing T. Higgins or Jamar Chase, it's Jermaine Burton. Now, Jermaine Burton has his own issues, but I bring that up as a comparison to say DeMarcus Robinson, when Nacua and Cooper Kupp is out there, is DeMarcus Robinson. When one of them is not out there, he's still DeMarcus Robinson. The replacement is Tyler Johnson. And actually, the reason, if you look at preseason waivers and deep flyers, I said Whittington not as the 3, not replacing DeMarcus Robinson. You remember we talked about this, and like he was playing a lot with the second team, and he got a little bit banged up. That's not the point. The point was, don't get excited about Whittington unless Nacua or Kupp gets hurt. Well, the answer ended up being Tyler Johnson because Whittington was still behind him. So I'm presenting all this to say, I'm still taking DeMarcus Robinson before I take Tyler Johnson. Let's not forget what he did last year. But they are back-to-back in my waiver column, Meaney, and I'd probably throw out about the same bid, which means I'm underbidding on DeMarcus Robinson, and if I get Tyler Johnson, I'm completely okay with it.
Yeah, I have the exact same take as you. He did run it did seem like he had the Puka Nacua role in terms of like where he was lining up over the field, like Puka. But Robinson did play 72 of 78 snaps, right? So
well, here, do you want some of the stats for this? So I tweeted this out yesterday. Route percentage, DeMarcus Robinson, this is without Nacua on the field. This is no Nacua. Only no Nacua snaps, everybody. Route percentage, 88.9 for DeMarcus Robinson, 97.1 for Johnson. That's one more snap. But to add to that, DeMarcus Robinson was actually 100% with Nacua, just to give you that idea right there. So it actually dropped, but even dropped more than you think. Team target percentage, 21 for Johnson, 18 for Robinson. Percentage of routes targeted, 21 for Johnson, 19 for Robinson. It actually went up a little bit more per route. And then the slot percentage, again, to go back to the Nacua role, 29% for Robinson, 35% for Johnson. So I just want to add those stats too. It's telling you what we saw. Like we're backing up with our numbers.
Yeah, and I think that's going to carry over, right? Like Robinson has his role, and he had it last year, and they didn't play him in the preseason when Whittington was getting all that buzz. I thought it was very telling of how they felt about DeMarcus Robinson. I think both of these guys are good targets, and people will spend on Robinson, and the sneaky play is Johnson. Stafford threw the ball, 49, 48 times in that game. He's been among the leaders in pass attempts almost like every year. You can go back to that big season that he had with Kupp. I mean, he was just behind Brady in touchdowns and right there among the leaders in pass attempts. So they're going to pass the football. Even without Puka Nacua, they're going to throw the football quite a bit. And it's a good offense. So a lot of the attention is going to be on Cooper Kupp. I mean, 21 targets, right? They're going to have all of the attention is going to be on him moving forward. Which is wild. I went back and looked at that 2021 season. He had 7 targets in every game. He had double-digit targets. Like, I think like 5 or 6 times. He was just like a freak that year. And I know it's just one game, but he may just be a freak again this year.
Do you know what his team target percentage was in week 1?
Oh my goodness. 42%.
Ooh, 43.8.
Wow.
Just behind him was Michael Pittman at 42.1. Also,
and he didn't really catch any of those passes though, Pittman.
No, it could have been so much better for Michael Pittman and Adonai Mitchell were both. So I threw out a stat yesterday, 25%, at least 25% of the team's targets, but not even 7 fantasy points. Actually, it wasn't even 6 fantasy points. And Pittman and Adonai Mitchell were both there. Do you want to know where he was in his team's air yards? I'll tell you, it's 53.5. By the way, that was only 7th. Do you want to guess who number 1 was in his team's
for air yards?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Tyreek's 4. It's not Tyreek.
I was gonna say Tyreek. Not JMO. JMO didn't have any deep shots.
Jameson was 3. So
3.
Yeah, very good. I'll give you 1 and 2 because you probably never guessed 1 and 2. Number 1 was George Pickens. 73% of his team.
Because Fields only threw to him. Really?
Yeah. Calvin Ridley was 2. And then Jameson Williams, Tyreek Hill, Cooper Kupp's at 7. Sandwiched in between, Terry McLaurin. Granted, a lot of it was on that one play that was left. We'd be having a different conversation, but not completely. Like, we still would have had our concerns about Jaden Daniels, but Cortland Sutton was 6.
Yeah, I mean, Bo Nix threw the football a lot more than I thought he would. 40-plus times.
He's throwing it that many times every single week. There's no way.
Oh, that was one of the biggest shocking. That was one of the shocking things for me because I thought that for a rookie quarterback in Seattle and a plus matchup against a run defense that really struggled last year, they didn't even try to run the football. Like the carries were, I think, 10-9 or something for McLaughlin. So, and they weren't even significantly down. Like, heck, they had a lead to start. So, anyways, that was pretty shocking. I don't think Nix is going to chuck the ball 40-plus times. But
if it is, fire up. Oh, yeah, we'll get to waivers. I want to finish up We're Report and get to some power up players and then waivers as we close things out for today.
Yeah.
We're Report. There's a couple guys in here you can read through. We're not going to go through every single one, but I did want to bring up 2 before we move on. Both wide receivers, and I gave them completely different scores for me. Drake London and Marvin Harrison. I gave 1 a 4 and 1 a 1. Do you want to guess which one got the 4 and which one got the 1?
London got the 4.
Yeah, of course, London got the 4. And it's nothing to do with Drake London, everybody.
No.
Watch the I actually don't want you to, because I don't want you to get depressed. But if you watch the Falcons game, it was, so the biggest problem is Kirk Cousins cannot backpedal and step back, and doesn't even, like Meaney brought this up yesterday on Sirius XM, even planting, it doesn't look like he trusts the leg. And I watched Aaron Rodgers closely because it's like, ooh, do we see the same thing? Granted, different foot. And there were times where it looked like there was a little hesitancy, a little not quite the Aaron Rodgers, but it was a much better game than Kirk Cousins. It wasn't a complete Aaron Rodgers game.
He didn't have a ton of mobility, but he had more than Cousins. Yeah.
Yes. He's always had, but that's the one also. He's also had more than mobility than Cousins.
Sure.
But there was one half-ass play. Some sites count it. Some guys, like, to give you an idea, some sites count that as a play action. Some sites don't. That's how half-assed it was. And it ended up being a batted down screen pass. So I gave him 4, and they're all for Kirk Cousins. Like, technically those 4 are Kirk Cousins concerned ducks, 4 out of 5. But until Kirk Cousins is okay, I'm severely concerned about Drake London. So much so, again, this is only week 2. Like, this is going to sound like I'm pushing Lazard up my waiver wire ranks. But for week 2 only, I think long and hard about Lazard versus London because of the quarterbacks.
Yeah. And Kirk Cousins in Philly this week for their home opener. You know that they're going to dial up some pressure on Cousins, and Slay is going to be on London. So, yeah, man, like, I saw the same things as you, and credit to the Steelers defense, which we gave credit to on the show, and TJ Watt and company. It's a good defense, but he didn't look comfortable at all. And you can say it's a new system, but it's going to be very similar to Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota under the Sean McVay tree, Zach Robinson. So it shouldn't have been a whole lot there. I know week 1 was pretty ugly across the board, and it's really just the first taste for a lot of quarterbacks and offenses.
Preseason week 4,
but yeah, like it didn't look good. It didn't look good. He looked uncomfortable. There were a couple throws where he didn't even plant that foot. He like kind of tossed it off to the side. Like there's a throw to London in the middle of the field where I was just like, I joked I was going to tweet, but I'm like, I'm not going to be that guy. But my initial thought was like, is that Ritter or is that Kirk Cousins? Because it looked a lot like the Atlanta Falcons pass attack last season. So not a good start for Cousins. The schedule is awful to start.
Yeah.
Like one of the things that I talked about on the show when we were doing futures was, hey, if you like the Falcons to win the division, why don't you just wait a little bit, because they open up Pittsburgh, Philly, KC, and they could legitimately start 0-3 before they get some divisional games. And then from week 11 on, it's like they could actually win out. But hey, man, like you said yesterday, we may actually just see Michael Penix Jr. this year, and that may not be a bad thing. It may not be a bad thing. He's got a decent ball.
He's NFL ready. He's 27 years old.
I'll tell you what, he's got some experience.
Oh my God. I was texting Emery and I was like, can we actually start using pro ready as a negative for quarterbacks? Bo Nix, everybody. All this pro ready, like Josh Rosen, every time somebody says pro ready, it's like, it should be a negative at this point, right? Like that should actually be on the
It should be Josh Rosen. Everyone's pumped him up. No good. You should dive into and take a second on why you're not concerned about Marvin Harrison, because I thought you had a really good take, and I agreed. I agreed with your take, and it's a good one because people are panicking. They took him end of the first, early second as their wide receiver 1 potentially.
It's twofold. It's rookie wide receivers in week 1 generally don't produce, period. And like Jamar, like I forget who tweeted it out, but Jamar Chase is the only wide receiver within the past however many years that has 75.
And I wonder why. Because Burrow and them played together in LSU, and they had a rapport, right?
Well, so and that's the thing. And of course, we go back to Adonai Mitchell and Jalen McMillan had plays left on the field. Maybe you could argue that's communication, but like some of them were penalties too. So we could have a little bit different, but really it was Brian Thomas. And then like a sprinkling of some others, like, oh, okay, that wasn't too bad. But I was going to say Ladd was okay. What was he, a wide receiver? Maybe 3 in full point PPR?
He had a touchdown, led the team in targets and catches. And
yeah, that's right, he did. So
he had a touchdown at the end of the game. He had some nice footwork there and found a touchdown.
For something like that's I feel just like, how do I, like the Ladd McConkey
He's your guy.
I forget about that. I know, I forget about the touchdown. I think I had moved on to other things I was writing at that point. But anyway, to talk about this is like, it's week 1. They rarely produce in week 1, yardage wise. They rarely do anything in week 1. There's still connections to be made. Now we're in the NFL where they barely even get time because it's 3 games that nobody even plays the full 3 games, let alone 2. And there was a miscommunication on the first play. There was a drop he never makes in college. And then that 4-yard pass, and then there was nothing in the second half. And everybody's like, oh my God, Kyler Murray missed him. And now the clip is going out from the All-22 today where you see the other angle. You actually sent it to me on Instagram, which I thought was really funny. But if you see it, like it's, so the picture that it shows that people pulled together, it almost looks like he's looking his way at the very end, doesn't it? But it's like he was moving. He actually, his progression was moving that way. But if you continue the play, it was breaking down and too late at that point, and the coverage was heading towards Marvin Harrison, who was basically doing jumping jacks.
Thrown the ball to him.
He would have thrown him, but I think mentally Kyler Murray checked out to a degree on Marvin Harrison. Not checked out like he wasn't an option, but just, look, the rookie's struggling. We're not on the same page, clearly, as just that first play. He's now going to be my second, third, fourth. Like, this might not even been Kyler Murray. They could have had play calls where you've seen it. Like, if anybody's played Madden, this is the easiest way to play it. If you played Madden, you know how it highlights the one wide receiver. That's the first option you're supposed to look at, and then you make your progressions. Like, Marvin Harrison might have been the third or fourth option that Kyler Murray was supposed to progress to in the play call. Yeah. So I'm not panicking. One duck, still roll him out there. Still going to continue to play him. So on the flip side, let's talk about a few power-ups. You brought up Ladd McConkey. I gave him 2. So they're like mushrooms, like the Mario mushrooms. Yeah. I gave him 2, mostly because of this. Like, love some Ladd McConkey. Yep. Love the potential going forward. The problem with McConkey, where I'm not giving him 3, 4, even 5, is because Joshua Palmer was still clearly the one, almost 100% of the routes. The 2 was actually Quentin Johnston. And McConkey was running as the slot third, which is cool. I actually like McConkey more than Quentin Johnston, but I think we're seeing that Quentin Johnston's career is not dead yet. And the stat that I love to throw out that nobody ever gets right until I phrase the question, because when I phrase the question, it's obvious. But it's like, who do you think had a higher drop percentage last year, Quentin Johnston or Keenan Allen? And then the response that I always get back was, no way. Keenan Allen dropped more than he did. And it's a percentage. Obviously, volume is there, but it's a percentage. It's not like who dropped more. It's a percentage. To say that Quentin Johnston wasn't as bad as people want to make him out to be, it was just highlighted by big plays and touchdowns and things left on the field. All that being said, do you think McConkey deserves more than 2 out of 5 power-ups? Would you give him a third or even a fourth? Am I hating on him? Am I hating on my love? Am I trying to keep my love in check?
Yeah, I think you're trying to keep your love in check here a little bit, but I think it's fair because Quentin Johnston, like if Quentin Johnston didn't have a good game, and he did, because I'm looking at the snaps, he played just as many as Ladd, 22 routes run versus 24. He had 5 targets. He showed up in the box score, which was surprising to me, even with DJ Chark sidelined. I just wasn't really sure what his involvement would be. And you're right. He's just he's into year 2. He's fairly raw, and he's still alive. He's not getting rid of him just yet. You got to coach him up, and Harbaugh is going to be able to do that for him. But I think it was a very encouraging first game for Ladd McConkey to lead the team in targets with 7. He's not going to be a big yardage guy, I don't think. Like in the slot, short yardage, the footwork was on full display, right? That catch that he had, he juked a couple guys and he found the end zone. His touchdown prop was 4.5 plus money, by the way. But I'm like, how many touches is he really going to score? Is he going to be a big red zone target? I just don't feel like he will be. But hey, maybe he will. Because of his route running ability, like kind of remind me of like Hunter Renfrow when he had that big season with Carr. Like it was just his route running, he was kind of always wide open. So I would say like I'd give him 3. Like I'd power him up to 3. I think that he will lead this team in catches. I think Palmer's maybe the bigger explosive type guy. Like he may have 3 for like 75 some games, where Ladd may have like 5 for 45. But he's going to be serviceable. I think he's going to make for at least a low end wide receiver 3.
Okay, well then let's see if you agree about the other one, and let's get into waivers now too, because of also this wide receiver. So one of the biggest days in week 1 fantasy football was Alec Pierce. Big plays, 3 receptions, big plays. Do you know how many targets, Chris Meaney? Of course you do, because you know this stuff. 3 targets, 3 That's for it. 3.
Yeah.
He ran the second most routes ahead of Adonai Mitchell, but Adonai Mitchell had 2 big plays left on the field that if those hit, maybe we're talking about Mitchell and not Pierce. And I'm not saying this to say like, look, Pierce was out there the second most. I'm hesitant on both. And this is coming from somebody that was like, take Mitchell. Because the interesting thing was the preseason, when Josh Downs got hurt, Mitchell, when they were running 3 wide, was in the slot. Cool, that's what we like. When they dropped down to 2 wide receivers, he kicked outside and Alec Pierce went jogging off the field. And like, oh, wow, even cooler. Guess what? I don't know if that was evaluation or trying to trick everybody, because the exact opposite happened to week 1. They dropped down to 2 wide receivers. Guess who came jogging off the field? Adonai Mitchell. That being said, Josh Downs doesn't sound like he's that close, but will be a factor at some point. Alec Pierce, I like, but this is why I liked him out of Cincinnati. He was kind of like that big play. Anthony Richardson can make those big plays, obviously, but I think the volume doesn't fit Pierce, where this is what I said about Pierce. 2 power-ups, but because he's Gabe Davis. I'm saying he's Buffalo Bills Gabe Davis. You might get a 0, and you might get 15 to 20. And I think that's where he should be.
No, I agree with you. I think he's a trap. I probably wouldn't even put a bid in. I think my league mates will. Yeah, I think my league mates will put. It's a trap. I think my league mates will
Brandon Cooks or Pierce.
Yeah, I would go Cooks. I was just going to.
Would you go Gabe Davis?
Shaheed, Gabe Davis going to be on the field all the time. He's going to, like, you just compared the 2. Like, give me Gabe Davis.
Would you go Mitchell or Pierce?
I would go Mitchell. Yeah,
I know think he has the higher ceiling, but I have him back to back.
Yeah. I just know what Pierce is, and I just think when everybody's fully healthy, like Adonai Mitchell is going to be the one that is on the field more. Yeah, he's very boomer bust. You're chasing those touchdowns.
Alec Pierce or Greg Dortch?
I'll go with Dortch.
See, I went with Pierce mostly because Dortch's volume came with Marvin Harrison being a non-factor. Like
I hope I'm wrong about that. I hope that Dortch is not getting 8 targets a game, because if he is, Marv or McBride are.
Dortch ran 68% of their routes. down there with Michael Wilson behind McBride and Marvin Harrison. I go back to why, like my answer in the preseason was I don't care if it's Michael Wilson or Greg Dortch, and I like Michael Wilson is because they're the third, technically fourth when you include James Conner option in the passing game. So that's why, like, I don't hate it that much. Down there in that range, Curtis Samuel, he's out at 15, by the way. Like, I don't know if that was he's not healthy yet, similar in a Mike Williams situation, or he's already been passed by everybody because he was not only behind Shakir. I don't know if you saw this in Flex Meeting. I picked up like 6 shares of Matt Collins before Sunday's game because it's just like he's been running as the 2. Like,
yeah, and he's a big body like for Josh Allen in the red zone. Like, he's had some moments. I know his best season was with the Raiders.
I just don't know if the starting role is his.
My a good buddy of mine, Drew, you know him too. We work together. Big Bills guy, and I was just like, good first game for Keon Coleman, right? I mean, he led the team in targets and snaps and running routes. And he's like, yeah, it was a good first game. Allen leaned on him a little bit. I was just like, what is really interested to see Curtis Samuel, not 100%. His take was like, yeah, I don't think he was 100% and he should get like more snaps moving forward. But I just always feel like his upside is just completely limited. Like, I don't think he's going to score a lot of touchdowns. I get he's familiar with Joe Brady and they can do some things with him. I think
what's
Shakir,
the big difference
Coleman
between Dortch and Samuel?
Probably not a ton. Maybe more like
Samuel will get runs.
Yeah, the difference is like maybe a couple more touches because of the ground game. But man, maybe we're just like not looking into how much Kyler likes this guy because it's all he seems to talk about is Greg Dortch. Man, he said something a couple months ago. If Dortch was like 1 foot taller, he'd be the best wide receiver in football. And I'm like, what is that comment? Like, he's not 1 foot taller. Like, why are you saying that? I don't understand why he would say something like that, but so maybe he just really likes Dortch.
He wishes he was ski low. He wishes he was taller. He wishes he was a baller. He wishes he had a girl so he could call her. Yeah, with a rabbit in a hat and a 6-foot baller.
Well done. Pretty impressive. But yeah, I think Dortch actually has a higher ceiling. I don't know, crazy, but probably pretty similar.
What is?
I think these guys I want to start. I don't want to start Samuel. I don't want to start Dortch.
I'm looking at what is a 6'4" Impala, by the way. I've never actually looked. Oh, it's the one that you usually see with like the rims and the hydraulics on it. That's what it is. Yeah. To this day, I've never looked actually up what a 6'4" Impala was. A 1964 Chevy Impala SS. It's pretty. You know it. You've seen it. Yes. And anything like any West Coast hip hop, like you've seen it. Like that, that's
still dry. Yeah.
Right. Then let me ask you a few more. We'll get out of here. Is Rashid Shaheed at number 2 for wide receivers too high? Here's my pecking order that I go at wide receiver again to remind everybody. Josh Palmer still at 1. Maybe I'm crazy on that. You won't even argue that's too high. But Josh Palmer still at 1. This is actually kind of a week 2, week 2, WEAK, week 2 for wide receivers, even with the loss of Nacua. But I go Palmer, Shaheed, DeMarcus Robinson, Tyler Johnson, Dobbs, Mike Williams. Could argue that's too high, but behind him, I'm shooting for ceiling. That's the thing with waivers. I'm often shooting for ceiling. If you need somebody now, and that's why I even put Lazard in the meh, I'll pass. But if you need somebody now, Lazard's different. It's a different ball game. That's why I kind of do these breakdowns in the column. But Mike Williams, Myers, Brandon Cooks, Gabe Davis, McMillan, Adonai Mitchell, and down from there. We've already talked about a lot of them. But is Shaheed too high at 2, or is that where he should be?
Yeah, I didn't know that Palmer was so low owned. Like for me on Mean Streets yesterday, I went Cooks and Shaheed and Robinson. So we're on the same page here. I would agree. Like Palmer, I would probably put Palmer. I put Shaheed ahead of Palmer, I think.
Would you?
But pretty close. Yeah, I think that there's
He's
maybe more touchdown
Palmer's
upside.
At 59. Actually, I could see Palmer being dropped this week because of McConkey.
I agree. I could see that as well. He only like 2 catches. So that's the thing that could happen. And Palmer should like see top corners. Like that's something to consider too. Like JC Horn going to be on Palmer this week. Like he's going to get a lot of attention that he didn't get in years past. But Shaheed, I mean, he's going to be very boomer bust as well. You mentioned it yesterday on the show. I think like the number 1 option on third downs for Derek Carr, and there weren't a lot of third downs for Carr and company in that game. But he's a deep threat guy in that offense. He really is. He's the field stretcher. Looking this week against the Cowboys, a 45-point total in a dome. I lean to the over. Like Shaheed, it wouldn't surprise me if he had like 7 touchdowns this season, and it would surprise me, I think, if Palmer had 7. So I know touchdowns are hard to predict, but I like Shaheed up near the top there. I think it's a good call.
Okay. Then real quick before we get our running backs, we talked Jordan Mason and J.K. Dobbins. Third, I'll give you a quick rundown, Meaney, see if you want to jump in or say anything about any of these. Charbonnet's third, but only there if the Kenneth Walker issue persists. If not, he's all the way down. Like, I'd actually stash Tank Bigsby before Charbonnet as of right now. Bigsby, surprisingly, maybe we're finally getting maybe they finally were serious about Travis Etienne not getting all that work, but he's at third because of that. Similarly, Jalen Wright's at 4. If Achane misses time, we're going to find out more today, or when you're listening to this, you might already have the news. Jeff Wilson's a factor, but I don't think he's the Achane replacement. I think Jeff Wilson is the Mostert replacement, which also, hey, he technically missed the what would have been walkthrough practice. And then 5 was McLaughlin ahead of Bucky Irving, Justice Hill, huge jump. Bigsby, Madison, Ty Chandler round out the top 10. Anybody you want to jump in on or throw a mention?
No, I like all. That's a good list. McLaughlin's probably the one that kind of does stand out to me, is what I said earlier, like 15 opportunities versus 10 for Javonte Williams. I thought that was one of the most surprising things that happened in week 1 was Bo Nix throwing the football, and then, McLaughlin getting more carries. He only played 34% of the snaps versus 52 for Javonte, but we have a history of Sean Payton using multiple backs. P. Ryan caught 50 passes in this backfield last year. It sounds like he's going to use both of these guys, and they're going to catch some balls out of the backfield. So I agree with you too. Like, if you you're stashing guys, right? You're like Charbonnet versus some of these other guys like Bucky Irving. Like, if you're just set at the running back position, why don't you just, take a flyer on like a Bucky Irving, or, McLaughlin's a guy that if you need somebody to start this week, like if you had Chuba Hubbard and your backfield's kind of gross, you feel like the long-term value for Hubbard and Ford, for example, or other guys are just not there. Like, I would rather have a McLaughlin versus a Charbonnet, as just somebody that you can kind of play now.
So that's where I was going to go as we got out of here. Do you have a pen ready? Because I was going to tell you to rank these 5 and the order that you would actually drop these players for waivers. Yeah. So Chuba Hubbard is on the list, obviously. Blake Corum, after getting 0 opportunities.
0 snaps.
Yeah, let's make that clear. Darnell Mooney, because of the see, like, this is good. I'm gonna make this not too easy on you. I originally had 2 different ones, but I feel like they're too easy. Let me see if I can. Hold on. I'm gonna go back to running back. How about 2 more being? Let's say Samaje Perine. I love this. And let's see, last one. How about, because he was a very popular pickup, how about Yoshivas? Rank those 5 in the order you drop them, if you need help. Like, if the Rams wide receivers are out there, if Charbonnet and Jalen Wright, and there's an injury situation. Like, obviously, you're not dropping these to say, like, oh, I need to go pick up Khalil Herbert, or I need to go pick up, Wan'Dale Robinson. These are like dropped basically for top 5 to 10-ish range pickups.
I'd probably drop like Yosivas and Mooney. I mean, I'm not crazy about Chuba, and we're going to see Jonathan Brooks, but at the same time, it's just like a body that's going to get touches over the next few weeks.
If I was ranking still pickups, Chuba fell all the way down to 13 behind Jamal Williams and Dowdle. Every third drive was Sanders. What if that flips this week?
He was a sit for me. Feeling like he would play 75% of the snaps and get like 90% of the touches, and that didn't happen. So I just, like, the way that I construct my teams, this is kind of what I'm thinking. Like, I'm pretty set at wide receiver. So, like, Yosivas, thinking T. Higgins is going to come back. Sure, maybe you're right. He's probably better suited in the Tyler Boyd role. But
you ready for this, Meaney? You ready? More teams rush attempts than Chuba Hubbard. Julian McLaughlin, Tank Bigsby, Gus Edwards, Zeke, Montgomery, even.
I mean, I don't have any Chuba. I wouldn't want any Chuba. I think my thinking, if I owned him, I would be immediately like, just, where's the Brooks owner? Like, do you want this guy? Do you want to have this Carolina backfield? But again, he's a healthy body. Corum, I don't have any shares of either.
Yes, you know who had almost twice as many touches? Actually, forget almost. Bucky Irvin had 11 to Chuba Hubbard's 6. Jamal Williams had 12, had double his touches.
In that game. Yeah, I mean, that game was out of hand. That's why he
it was, but it's just, yeah.
I think I would keep anyways, I think I go with the wide receivers and then I get into maybe Chuba and then P. Ryan and Corum. So I don't own any Corum. And what I said yesterday on Mean Streets, like if you drafted Corum in the 8th round, like you can't drop him.
You can't drop him.
This
goes back to the same thing we talked about all the year. You drafted Corum if something happened to Kyron Williams. If it doesn't happen in 1 week, you don't drop him. Then you should have never drafted him.
With confidence, when I look at the top 10 dropped players in CBS or ESPN,
Corum's going to be there.
Corum will be there. And it's just like fantasy in a nutshell for people. They hear things about somebody like Corum and the punt return stuff that happened and the kick return stuff, and they reach on Corum, and then they see that he had 0 snaps. So you took him in the 8th round. I'm going to have a great conversation with Dane about this because he is a big Corum guy. He took him in the 8th round. Maybe you didn't start him because it was a tough matchup and he's rookie against the Lions. But you can't just turn around and cut him week 2. I don't think, or maybe, I mean, you've been doing this a long time too. Maybe you do. Maybe because you miss out on a McLaughlin who has a role right now, or a Mason who is linked to a top offense in football and could be a home
you would
run
have to
play
drop
for you.
for Mason.
You're just you're sitting there holding on to Corum all the time because you spent that 8th round pick. But I'd think it'd be too early to panic because
too early.
If you took him, you had a feeling that he was going to have a role at some point. So you have to be a little bit patient.
You want a good example? How about, as we get out of here, 2022, week 10 for this running back. He had 1 double-digit score before that, thankfully because of a touchdown only. And then week 10, 10, 15, 15, 10, 5, 13, and then 7 in the last week. You know that was that year? Somebody who everybody drafted in like the 8th, 9th round because Leonard Fournette might get hurt. And he actually played most of the season, but Leonard Fournette was pretty much toasty at that point. And Rachaad White took over in the second half of the season. And if you dropped Rachaad White, you missed out on the whole reason you took him in like that 8th, 9th round. I know it's a long time to wait.
It is.
And then you got to get through buys. But I'd put it this way. At least wait till we get to buys before you start dropping somebody that you drafted for that potential upside.
Yeah, I agree.
Fair, right?
And not a great first game for Corum truthers because Kyron had the same type of work, right? Like over 70% of the snaps, and Ronnie Rivers is playing ahead of him. So not a great first game, but the question that we did have about Kyron was, can he hold up? So it's not like, would he be the lead? You and I felt like he was going to be the lead. Can he hold up as the lead over the course of a season? So it's a good lottery ticket to have, and it was just an expensive stash in the middle rounds of draft. That's all.
Well, hopefully you can hold up through the entire season, more so than a lot of my teams did. Same year, same result for Jake Ciely. More
early.
Yeah. I mean, look, how many dudes that I already lost? I already lost like 3 people in week 1. Check out Chris Meaney at Chris Meaney over at FTN. The waiver column is up. We'll be back tomorrow to talk early rankings for this week and more things looking forward. And reminder, if your name is Mike W. or Jordan P. or potentially Eric H., I need to hear from you, dude.
Reach out.
Email me again. You sent me your contest entry, so yeah, you got till Thursday morning, maybe even Wednesday night, because I'm gonna have to put the show together. So we'll see. And we're out of here. Please keep listening, and please cut me off at some point. No more Nacua, Sag.